The Velkari Empire had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. Their ships moved through the darkness of space like silver ghosts, silent and deadly. No species had ever defeated them in battle. No world had ever refused their rule. They were the masters of 1,000 star systems, and every living creature in the Orion Arm knew their name. Queen Sarathva sat on her throne aboard the great ship called the Eternal Dawn. She was 9 feet tall, covered in scales that shifted colors like oil on water. Her 4 arms rested on the armrests of her throne, each hand ending in claws that could cut through steel. Her compound eyes saw everything, missed nothing. She had ruled the empire for 3,000 years, and in all that time, she had never known fear, but she knew love. She loved her daughter more than anything in the universe. Princess Kiraven was young by Velkari standards, only 300 years old. She was smaller than her mother, standing 7 feet tall, with scales that glowed soft blue when she was happy. She had her mother's sharp mind but also a curiosity that sometimes worried the queen. Kiraven wanted to explore, to see new worlds, to understand other species. Most Velkari saw other races as beneath them, as insects to be ignored or crushed. But Kiraven was different. On this day, Kiraven stood before her mother with excitement in her eyes. "The scouts have found a new species," she said. "They call themselves humans. They live on a small blue planet called Earth." Sarathva waved one of her hands dismissively. "I have read the reports. They are primitive. They only discovered faster than light travel a few decades ago. They are nothing. But that is what makes them interesting," Kiraven insisted. "They are so young, so fragile. They live for less than 100 years, mother. Can you imagine? And yet they build ships and venture into space. They are brave." The queen looked at her daughter with a mix of amusement and concern. "You find bravery in stupidity? They do not know the dangers that wait for them. They are children playing with fire. Then let me observe them. Let me take a small ship and watch them from orbit. I want to understand how they think, how they live. Please, mother." Sarathva was quiet for a long moment. She did not like the idea of her daughter going anywhere alone. The universe was dangerous, even for a Velkari princess. But she also knew that Kiraven needed to learn, to grow, to experience things beyond the safety of the fleet. "Very well," the queen said at last, "but you will take guards with you." Kiraven's scales flickered with joy. "Thank you, mother. I will be careful, I promise." She was not careful. 2 weeks later, Kiraven orbited Earth in a small reconnaissance vessel. She had sent her guards back to the fleet after the first few days, telling them she was safe, that she wanted to observe alone. They had protested, but she was a princess, and her word was law. She spent hours watching the humans through her ship's sensors. She watched their cities, their farms, their strange vehicles that crawled along roads. She watched them gather in large buildings to watch sports and entertainment. She watched children playing in parks, couples walking hand in hand, old people sitting on benches and feeding birds. They were so fragile, she thought, so temporary, and yet they seemed happy. They laughed and loved and built things, knowing that their time was short. It was beautiful in a way she had never considered before. She moved her ship lower, wanting a closer look. This was against protocol. Reconnaissance vessels were supposed to stay in high orbit, invisible and undetected. But Kiraven was curious, and curiosity made her careless. She did not notice the warning lights until it was too late. The ship's gravity dampeners failed first, then the navigation system, then the engines. Alarms screamed in her ears as the vessel began to fall, pulled down by Earth's gravity. She tried to send a distress signal, but the communications array was dead. She tried to restart the engines, but nothing responded. The blue planet grew larger and larger in her view screen. She could see mountains now, covered in white snow. She could see green forests and brown rivers. It would have been beautiful if she was not about to die. The ship hit the atmosphere and began to burn. Kiraven was thrown against the walls of the cockpit. her exoskeleton cracking from the impact. Pain shot through her body, worse than anything she had ever felt. She screamed, but no one could hear her. The last thing she saw before darkness took her was a mountain rushing up to meet her. Far away, in the cold depths of space, Queen Sarathva felt something strange. A chill ran through her body, a feeling of wrongness that she could not explain. She stood from her throne and walked to the window that looked out at the stars. "Something is wrong," she whispered. Her advisors looked at each other nervously. The queen's instincts were legendary. When she felt something, it was usually true. "Send a message to the princess," Sarathva commanded. "Tell her to report immediately." The communications officer worked quickly, sending the signal across the vast distance of space. Minutes passed, then hours. No response came. The queen's scales began to shift to a deep red, the color of anger and fear combined. She turned to her advisors, her compound eyes burning with intensity. "Find my daughter," she said, her voice cold as ice. "Find her now." On Earth, night had fallen over the Rocky Mountains. Snow covered the ground in a thick white blanket. The forest was quiet, peaceful, untouched by the drama unfolding among the stars. Danny Hernandez walked along the trail with a flashlight in his hand. He was a park ranger, 42 years old, with gray in his beard and old scars on his hands. He had been a soldier once, had seen things that still visited him in his dreams, but that was a long time ago. Now he lived alone, in a small cabin, taking care of the mountain and the animals that called it home. He heard the explosion before he saw the fire. It echoed through the valley like thunder, shaking the trees and sending birds flying into the night sky. He looked up and saw a streak of light falling from the heavens, trailing smoke and flame. It crashed somewhere to the north, maybe 3 miles away. Danny stood still for a moment, thinking. It could be a plane. It could be a meteor. It could be something else entirely. He knew he should call it in, report it to his supervisors, wait for the authorities to handle it. Instead, he started walking toward the crash site. He did not know why. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the soldier in him, the part that ran toward danger instead of away from it. Maybe it was just curiosity. Whatever the reason, his choice would change the fate of 2 worlds forever. Danny walked through the dark forest for nearly an hour before he found the crash site. The snow made the going slow, and more than once he had to climb over fallen trees or cross frozen streams, but he kept moving, following the glow of dying flames that lit up the night sky. When he finally reached the clearing, he stopped and stared. It was not a plane. It was not a meteor. It was something he had never seen before. The vessel was shaped like a teardrop, maybe 30 feet long. Its surface was smooth and silver, though now it was cracked and burned. Pieces of strange metal lay scattered across the snow, glowing with faint purple light. Smoke rose from the wreckage, carrying a smell like copper and flowers. Danny had seen a lot of strange things in his life. He had fought in wars, survived ambushes, watched friends die in his arms. But this was different. This was not from Earth. He approached slowly, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. His heart was beating fast, but his hands were steady. Whatever was in that ship, he needed to see it. The cockpit was torn open, its glass shattered. Danny climbed up the twisted metal and looked inside. She was lying on the floor of the cockpit, broken and bleeding. Danny had imagined aliens in many ways. He had watched movies about gray creatures with big eyes, about monsters with acid blood, about beings of pure light. But he had never imagined anything like this. She was tall, maybe 7 feet, though it was hard to tell with her lying down. Her body was covered in scales that might have been blue once, but now were dull and gray. She had 4 arms, all of them bent at wrong angles. Her head was shaped like a teardrop, with 2 large compound eyes that flickered weakly in the light of his flashlight. Violet blood pooled beneath her, soaking into the metal floor. She was dying. He knew what dying looked like. For a long moment, Danny just stood there, looking at her. His mind raced with thoughts. This was an alien. A real alien. He should call someone. He should report this. He should run away and let the government handle it. But then she made a sound. A small, weak sound, like a kitten mewing in pain. And Danny made his choice. He climbed into the cockpit and knelt beside her. Her eyes focused on him for just a second before closing again. She was still alive, but barely. "Okay," Danny said softly. "Okay. I don't know what you are, but I'm going to help you. Just hold on." He did not know her biology. He did not know if human medicine would help or hurt her. He did not know anything about her species, her needs, her physiology, but he knew basic first aid, and he knew that doing something was better than doing nothing. He examined her carefully. Her exoskeleton was cracked in 3 places, 2 on her torso and 1 on her leg. The violet blood was coming from these cracks. He took off his jacket and tore it into strips, using them to wrap her wounds and slow the bleeding. She was heavy, much heavier than she looked. Her body was dense, her bones made of something harder than human bone. But Danny was strong, and he had carried wounded soldiers before. He lifted her carefully, cradling her in his arms like a child. "This is going to be a long walk," he muttered. 3 miles through snow and darkness, carrying an alien princess in his arms. His legs burned, his back screamed, his lungs felt like they were on fire. But he kept going, step by step, because that was what you did when someone needed help. The sun was starting to rise when he finally reached his cabin. He kicked the door open and carried her inside, laying her on his bed. The sheets turned purple with her blood, but he did not care. He cleaned her wounds with purified water, careful not to touch the exposed flesh beneath her scales. He bandaged what he could with clean cloth. He covered her with blankets to keep her warm. He did not know if Valkyrie needed warmth, but it seemed like the right thing to do. Then he sat in a chair beside the bed and waited. Hours passed. Day turned to afternoon. Afternoon turned to evening. Danny did not sleep. He watched her breathe, counting each rise and fall of her chest, making sure she was still alive. She woke up just after midnight. Her eyes opened slowly, flickering with faint light. She looked around the cabin, taking in the wooden walls, the simple furniture, the fire burning in the stone fireplace. Then her eyes found Danny, and she went very still. "You." Her voice was weak, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "You did not kill me." Danny shook his head. "No, I didn't." "Why?" It was such a simple question, but it held a weight that Danny could feel. This creature had expected death. She had expected him to hurt her, to fear her, to treat her as an enemy. The surprise in her voice was genuine and deep. "You were hurt," Danny said simply. "That's reason enough." She stared at him for a long time, her compound eyes unreadable. Then, something strange happened. Her scales began to shift color, from dull gray to soft blue. It was like watching the sun rise, slow and beautiful. "I am Kira Ven," she said, "Princess of the Valkyrie Empire. Danny Hernandez. Park Ranger." Quote. She made a sound that might have been a laugh. "A park ranger. I am saved by a keeper of trees and animals. Someone had to do it." Kira Ven tried to sit up, but pain flashed across her face, and she fell back. Danny moved quickly, adjusting the pillows behind her head to make her more comfortable. "You should rest," he said. "You're hurt bad. I don't know how your body works, but I think you need time to heal. You know nothing of my species, yet you helped me anyway. You did not know if your medicine would kill me." "I didn't," Danny admitted. "But I figured dying from my help was better than dying alone in that wreck." Kira Ven's eyes flickered again, brighter this time. "Humans are strange. My people have studied many species across the galaxy. Most of them are driven by fear and greed. They fight each other, betray each other, destroy each other for small gains. But you found a creature from another world, a being you had never seen before. And your first thought was to help." Danny shrugged. "Not everyone is the same. Humans can be cruel too. I've seen plenty of cruelty in my life, but I've also seen kindness. I've seen people risk their lives for strangers, give their last meal to someone hungry, carry a wounded friend for miles through enemy territory. He paused, looking at her with quiet eyes. I guess I just believe that kindness is a choice. Every day, every moment, you can choose to be kind or cruel. I try to choose kindness when I can. Kiraven was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. My mother will come looking for me. When she finds out I am missing, she will send ships. Many ships. Is that a problem? It could be. My mother loves me more than anything in the universe. But her love is fierce. If she believes I was harmed, she will destroy whoever is responsible. She will burn this world to ash without hesitation. Danny thought about this. He thought about the news he had seen, about the governments and militaries of the world, about the billions of people who lived on Earth. Then we need to let her know you're safe, he said. Kiraven shook her head weakly. My communications device was destroyed in the crash. I cannot contact her. There has to be a way. There is. When her ships arrive, I must speak to her directly. But Danny, she reached out with one of her hands, her fingers trembling. You must be careful. If she sees you before she sees me, she may kill you without asking questions. Danny took her hand gently. It was cool and smooth, like polished stone. Then I guess we better make sure she sees you first. The Velkari fleet arrived 3 days later. 2,000 warships appeared in Earth's orbit, blocking out the stars. Each ship was massive, some of them larger than cities. They hung in the darkness of space like silver mountains, their weapons glowing with power that could crack a planet in half. On Earth, panic spread like wildfire. Governments scrambled to respond. Military bases went on high alert. Sirens wailed in cities across the world. People ran through the streets, not knowing where to go, not knowing what to do. Some prayed, some cried, some just stared at the sky, watching the impossible shapes that hung above them. The United Nations sent message after message, begging for communication. They offered peace, surrender, anything the aliens wanted, but the fleet did not respond. The ships simply waited, silent and terrible. Inside the command ship, Queen Serethva stood before a massive view screen that showed the blue planet below. Her scales were dark red, the color of barely contained rage. Her 4 hands were clenched into fists, her claws digging into her own palms. Report, she commanded. Admiral Vexnar stepped forward. His head bowed in respect. He was old by Velkari standards. Over 2,000 years. And he had served the Queen faithfully for most of that time. But even he was afraid of her in this moment. We have traced the princess's last known position to this planet, he said. Her ship's emergency beacon activated briefly during the descent, then went silent. We believe she crashed in the mountainous region of the northern continent. And the humans? They have made no hostile moves. They are attempting to communicate, but we have not responded. Their weapons are primitive. They pose no threat to us. Serethva turned to face him, her compound eyes burning with cold fire. They pose no threat? My daughter is missing. She may be dead, and you tell me they pose no threat? Vexnar lowered his head further. Forgive me, my queen. I only meant, I know what you meant. But understand this. If my daughter is dead, this world will burn. Every city, every forest, every ocean. I will leave nothing but ash and memory. She turned back to the view screen, her voice dropping to a whisper. Find her. Send ground teams to search every inch of that planet. And if any human interferes, kill them. Within hours, Velkari soldiers descended on Earth. They came in dropships, hundreds of them, landing in cities and forests and mountains across the globe. Each soldier stood 8 feet tall in combat armor that could stop a tank shell. They carried weapons that fired beams of concentrated energy, capable of cutting through buildings like paper. The humans tried to fight. In some places, military forces engaged the Velkari, firing missiles and bullets and bombs. It made no difference. The alien armor absorbed everything, and the soldiers barely slowed down. They walked through human armies like adults walking through children, but they did not attack civilians. They did not burn cities or slaughter innocents. They simply searched, moving through streets and buildings, looking for something, looking for someone. In his cabin in the mountains, Danny watched the news on a battery-powered radio. The signal was weak, cutting in and out, but he heard enough. Alien invasion. Global panic. Military defeat. The world was ending, and no one knew why. Kiravan sat up in bed, strong enough now to move on her own. Her wounds were healing faster than Danny had expected. Velkari biology was remarkable, she had explained. Their bodies could repair damage that would kill a human in days. They are looking for me, she said quietly. Danny nodded. Yeah, I figured. My mother is angry. She believes I am dead. Or captured. Or worse. She will not stop until she finds me. Then we need to go to her, show her you're alive. Kiravan shook her head. It is not that simple. You do not understand my mother. Danny. Her love is absolute. But so is her anger. If she sees you before she understands what happened, she will kill you. She will see a human with her injured daughter and assume the worst. Then we'll make sure she sees you first. You'll talk to her, explain everything. And if she does not listen? If her rage is too great? Danny was quiet for a moment. He walked to the window and looked out at the snow-covered mountains. Somewhere out there, alien soldiers were searching for the princess. Somewhere above, a fleet of warships waited to destroy his world. Then I'll take that risk, he said. I didn't save you just to let you die. And I'm not going to let your mother destroy my planet because of a misunderstanding. Kiravan stared at him, her eyes flickering with emotions he could not read. You are either very brave or very foolish. Probably both. She made that sound again, the one that might have been a laugh. My people have a saying. The bravest warriors are those who fight for others instead of themselves. By that standard, you are the bravest being I have ever met. Danny turned to face her. I'm no warrior. Not anymore. I'm just a man who does what he thinks is right. That is what makes you remarkable. She stood slowly, testing her legs. She was still weak, but she could walk. She moved to the window and stood beside Danny, looking out at the same mountains. We should go soon. The longer we wait, the more damage my mother will do. She is not cruel by nature, but grief can make monsters of us all. Can you travel? I will have to. The fate of your world depends on it. Danny went to his closet and pulled out a heavy coat. He handed it to Kiravan, who looked at it with curiosity. It's cold outside, he explained. I don't know if you feel cold, but we do. Thank you. She wrapped the coat around her shoulders. It was too small for her, barely covering her upper body, but it was better than nothing. Danny grabbed his truck keys and headed for the door. Denver is about 4 hours away. That's where the news said the aliens set up their main base. We'll go there, find their commander, and get you to your mother. And if they shoot first, then I'll make sure they see you before they see me. They walked out into the cold morning air. Danny's old pickup truck sat in the driveway, covered in a thin layer of snow. He helped Kiravan into the back seat, where she could lie down if she needed to rest. As he started the engine, he looked at her in the rearview mirror. She was watching him with those strange, beautiful eyes. Danny, she said, whatever happens today, I want you to know that I am grateful. In 300 years of life, no one has ever shown me the kindness you have shown, not because they wanted something from me, not because they feared me, but simply because it was right. Danny nodded, his throat tight. Let's save the thank yous for after we survive this. He put the truck in gear and drove down the mountain toward an uncertain future. Behind them, the sun rose over the peaks, painting the snow in shades of gold and pink. It was beautiful, Danny thought. Beautiful and fragile and worth fighting for. He just hoped he would live to see another sunrise. The drive to Denver was long and strange. The highways were nearly empty. Most people had fled the cities, heading for the countryside, for the mountains, for anywhere they thought might be safe. Danny passed abandoned cars on the side of the road, their doors hanging open, their owners gone. He passed gas stations with broken windows and stores with empty shelves. The world was falling apart, and everyone was running. But Danny drove toward the danger, not away from it. Kiravan rested in the back seat, her eyes half closed. The motion of the truck seemed to soothe her, and her scales had returned to their soft blue color. Every now and then, she would speak, telling Danny about her world, her people, her mother. The Velkari were not always conquerors, she said. Long ago, we were a peaceful species. We lived on our home world, studied the stars, created art and music and poetry. But then we discovered that the universe was dangerous. Other species saw our peace as weakness. They attacked us, enslaved us, tried to destroy us. What happened? We fought back. We learned to be strong, to be ruthless, to show no mercy to those who threatened us. Over thousands of years, we built an empire. We conquered those who had conquered us. We became the thing we once feared. She paused, her voice growing soft. My mother was born during the Great Wars. She watched her own parents die in battle. She swore that no one would ever hurt her family again. That is why she is so protective of me. That is why her anger is so terrible. Danny nodded slowly. Sounds like she's been through a lot. She has. But I sometimes wonder if we have lost something along the way. We are powerful now. But are we still good? Do we still remember what we were fighting for? What were you fighting for? To protect the ones we love. To keep them safe. Danny looked at her in the mirror. Then maybe she hasn't forgotten. Maybe she's just scared. Kiravan's eyes flickered. Scared? Of losing you. The more you love someone, the more scared you are of losing them. It makes you crazy sometimes. Makes you do things you wouldn't normally do. She was quiet for a long time after that. They reached Denver in the late afternoon. The city was transformed. Human military vehicles were everywhere. Soldiers in green uniforms moving through the streets. But they were not fighting. They were watching, waiting, keeping their distance from the alien command post that had been set up in the center of downtown. The Velkari had taken over a large plaza near the state capitol building. Their ships sat on the pavement like giant silver insects. And their soldiers stood guard around the perimeter. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, their armor gleaming in the fading sunlight. Danny drove as close as he could before human soldiers stopped him. A young man in uniform approached his window, his face pale with fear. Sir, you need to turn around. This area is restricted. The aliens have. I know, Danny said. I have someone they're looking for. The soldier looked confused. What do you mean? Danny pointed to the back seat. The soldier leaned in, looked at Kiravan, and his face went white as snow. Oh my God, is that? Yeah, now get out of my way. I need to talk to whoever's in charge over there. The soldier stepped back, his mouth opening and closing but no words coming out. Danny drove past him, ignoring the shouts of other soldiers. He drove straight toward the alien perimeter, his heart pounding in his chest. The Velkari soldiers saw him coming. They raised their weapons, energy beams humming with deadly power. Danny stopped the truck about 50 feet from the line and stepped out slowly, his hands raised in the air. I have your princess, he shouted. She's alive. I'm here to return her to her mother. The soldiers did not lower their weapons. One of them, taller than the others with markings on his armor that suggested rank, stepped forward. Human, you will kneel. Any movement will result in your death. Danny lowered himself to his knees, his hands still raised. Behind him, he heard the truck door open. Kiravan emerged, standing unsteadily but tall. Commander Rethel, she said, her voice stronger than Danny expected. Stand down. This human is not an enemy. He saved my life. The commander's eyes went wide. His weapon dropped slightly. Uncertainty crossing his alien face. Princess Kiravan? We thought you were dead. I nearly was. But this man found me in the wreckage of my ship. He carried me for miles through snow and darkness. He treated my wounds and cared for me when he had no reason to do so. She walked forward, past Danny, until she stood directly in front of the commander. Take me to my mother. Now. Take me to my mother. The commander bowed his head. At once, Princess, he gestured to his soldiers, who lowered their weapons. Then, he spoke into a communication device on his wrist. His words, rapid and urgent. Within minutes, a shuttle descended from the sky, larger and more ornate than the others. It landed in the plaza, its doors opening with a hiss of steam. Queen Sarathva stepped out. She was even more impressive than Kiraven had described. 9 feet tall, her scales shifting through colors that had no names in human language. Her forearms hung at her sides, each one powerful enough to tear a man in half. Her compound eyes swept across the scene, taking in the soldiers, the human trucks, the crowd of frightened people watching from a distance. Then she saw her daughter. For a moment, just a moment, her terrible presence seemed to crack. The rage drained from her face, replaced by something softer, something human. Kiraven, she whispered. Mother. The queen moved forward, her steps quick and desperate. She reached her daughter and wrapped all 4 arms around her. Pulling her close, Kiraven returned the embrace, burying her face in her mother's chest. They stayed like that for a long time. The soldiers watched in silence. The humans watched in silence. The whole world seemed to hold its breath. Finally, Sarathva pulled back, her hands touching her daughter's face, her shoulders, her arms. She was checking for injuries, Danny realized, making sure she was really alive. You are hurt, the queen said, her voice tight with emotion. I am healing. Thanks to him. Kiraven turned and pointed at Danny, who still knelt on the ground, his hands raised. The queen's eyes followed her daughter's gesture. She looked at Danny, really looked at him, for the first time. Her gaze was intense, penetrating, as if she could see into his very soul. She walked toward him, each step heavy with power. Danny did not move. He did not lower his hands. He met her gaze without flinching. Even though every instinct told him to run, the queen stopped directly in front of him. She towered over him, blocking out the sky. You saved my daughter, she said. It was not a question. Yes, Danny said. Why? It was the same question Kiraven had asked, back in his cabin. And Danny gave the same answer. Because she was hurt. That's reason enough. The queen was silent. Her eyes searched his face, looking for lies, for hidden motives, for anything that would explain this strange creature who had done the impossible. She found nothing but truth. Queen Sarathva stood before Danny for what felt like an eternity. The wind blew cold through the plaza, carrying the smell of snow and distant fires. Soldiers on both sides watched in tense silence, waiting to see what would happen next. Finally, the queen spoke. Rise, human. Danny stood slowly, lowering his hands. His knees ached from kneeling on the hard pavement, but he ignored the pain. He kept his eyes on the queen, meeting her gaze with quiet dignity. In 12,000 years of empire, Sarathva said, no lesser species has ever shown mercy to a Velkari. We are conquerors, feared across the galaxy. Other races run from us, fight us, try to bargain with us, but none of them have ever helped us. None of them have ever risked themselves for one of our people. She paused, her scales shifting to a color Danny had not seen before. It was soft, almost gentle, like moonlight on water. I came here to destroy your world. I was going to burn every city, poison every ocean, leave nothing but death in my wake. All because I thought someone had hurt my daughter. I understand, Danny said. You were scared. When you love someone that much, fear can make you do terrible things. The queen's eyes flickered. You understand? How can you understand? You are a primitive creature from a primitive world. You live for less than 100 years. What can you possibly know of love that spans millennia? Maybe nothing, Danny admitted. But I know what it feels like to lose people you care about. I know what it feels like to want to burn the world down because of it. The only difference is, I didn't have a fleet of warships to do it with. For a moment, the queen was silent. Then she made a sound that might have been a laugh, low and rumbling. You are brave, human. Either that, or you are too stupid to know when to be afraid. Probably a bit of both. Kiravan stepped forward, placing a hand on her mother's arm. He is not stupid, mother. He is kind. There is a difference. Sarathva looked at her daughter, and her expression softened further. She reached up and touched Kiravan's face with one of her hands. You almost died, she whispered. I cannot lose you. You are all I have left. I know, mother. But I am safe now. Because of him. The queen turned back to Danny. She studied him for another long moment. Then did something that made every Velkari soldier in the plaza gasp. She bowed. The queen of the Velkari Empire, ruler of 1,000 star systems, bowed her head to a park ranger from Colorado. I owe you a debt, she said. That cannot be repaid. You saved the most precious thing in my universe. You did so without thought of reward, without fear of consequence. In the name of the Velkari Empire, I thank you. Danny did not know what to say. He stood there, frozen, as the most powerful being he had ever met showed him respect he had never imagined. You're welcome, he managed. The queen raised her head. Your world will not be harmed. My fleet will withdraw immediately. And from this day forward, humanity will be under the protection of the Velkari Empire. If any species threatens you, we will answer. Danny blinked. Just like that? Just like that. Your people have earned something that no other species has ever earned from us. Not through war, not through diplomacy, but through simple kindness. She gestured to one of her guards, who stepped forward carrying a small box. The queen opened it and removed a crystalline badge that glowed with soft inner light. It was beautiful, like a captured star. This is a Velkari honor mark, she explained. It is given only to those who have performed acts of extraordinary valor or sacrifice. In 12,000 years, only 17 beings outside our species have ever received one. She reached forward and attached the badge to Danny's chest. It was warm against his shirt, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. You are now the 18th. Danny looked down at the badge, then up at the queen. I didn't do it for a reward. I know, Sarathva said. That is precisely why you deserve one. She turned and walked back to her shuttle, her daughter beside her. But before she boarded, she stopped and looked back at Danny one last time. You asked me earlier how humans could understand love that spans millennia. Perhaps the answer is that love has no scale. A moment of kindness can change the universe just as much as 1,000 years of conquest. Perhaps that is the lesson your species has to teach mine. She entered the shuttle. Kiravan lingered for just a moment longer, her eyes meeting Danny's across the distance. Thank you, she said, for everything. Then she was gone, the shuttle rising into the sky and disappearing into the fleet above. Over the next few hours, the Velkari withdrew. Their ships lifted off from cities around the world, their soldiers returning to their vessels, their weapons going silent. The fleet that had come to destroy Earth turned and vanished into the darkness of space, leaving behind only wonder and questions. Danny watched them go from the plaza in Denver. Soldiers and civilians gathered around him, asking questions, wanting to know what had happened. News crews arrived, cameras flashing, reporters shouting. He would become famous, he knew. The man who saved the world, but he did not feel like a hero. He just felt tired. Eventually, he got back in his truck and drove home. The cabin was quiet when he returned. The fire had gone out, and the sheets on his bed were still stained purple with Kiravan's blood. He stood in the doorway for a long time, looking at the empty room. Then he cleaned up the mess, started a new fire, and made himself a cup of coffee. Life would be different now. Everything would be different. Humanity knew they were not alone in the universe, and they knew that somewhere out there, an ancient empire watched over them. Scientists would study the crash site. Governments would prepare for future contact. The world would never be the same. But for Danny, some things would remain unchanged. He would still walk the trails of his mountain. He would still watch the sunrise, paint the snow in shades of gold. He would still help those who needed helping, because that was who he was. A month later, a package arrived at his cabin. It had no return address, no explanation. Inside was a small device that projected a hologram when activated. Kira Venn appeared before him, life-sized and glowing. "Hello, Danny," she said, her scales bright blue with happiness. "I wanted you to know that I am fully healed now. I have been telling my people about you, about your kindness, about what humans can be. Some of them are starting to listen." She smiled, an expression she had learned from him. "Perhaps one day, our species will meet again. Not as conquerors and conquered, but as friends. That is my hope. That is my dream. And I have you to thank for showing me it was possible." The hologram flickered and faded. Danny sat alone in his cabin, the crystal badge warm against his chest. Outside, snow began to fall. The mountain was quiet, peaceful, beautiful, and somewhere among the stars, an empire remembered that kindness was never wasted.